places. Some of us went into Babylon. Some of us slept. Some of us remained in the land of Israel. It became more and more difficult to preserve in authenticity without any discrepancies at all. This oral transmission, because they were separated from each other, and because in Israel there was a lack of how do I want to say this? It wasn't preserved well, and the reason it wasn't our fault as Jews. It was because the people living there were making it very difficult for Jews to learn. And the way they did this is they literally killed the sages. And the sages, if you look this up, it talks about this. Year in, year out, whoever was in charge, whatever non-Jew was running the country, was the king of the land at that time, whether he was, working for the Romans or the Greeks or whatever, they made it very difficult for the Jews to continue learning. And there's a lot of Torah to learn, and they lost a lot of the transmission. Whereas when they were in Babylon all those years, it was seamless. The Babylonians, the Persians, they loved us, and they left us alone, and we learned well, and we didn't have any problems with transmission. The Gemara tells us that 3 times did somebody have to come up from Babylon and teach the Torah to the people still living in the land of Israel. First one was Ezra, the second one was Hillel, and the last one was Rabbi Hiya. And all 3 of them had to come up because in Israel they just could not. Their leaders were being slaughtered. People were there's a story of like Hanukkah when people were in the caves, they're spitting drill. People were like, there's no way they're going to learn Torah. They couldn't possibly learn all this stuff. So when Rabbi Hillel came to Israel and these things were recorded, they recorded it in his name, as opposed to what? As opposed to the version that Rabbi Shammai, who was their leader, had. Because sometimes the two were not on the same page. And we, as it turns out, we always follow, or almost always follow, I think there's 3 exceptions, but almost always follow, in an argument between Hillel and Shammai, we take the version of Hillel. Because we assume it's more pure and there's no problems with it. So it's not a question of interpretation. It's not something that Hillel came up with on his own. It's not like something Shammai came up on his own. It's just everything that they knew to be true. The difference was they had 2 different versions at that point. And so the 2 versions are credited with their names. But the oral Torah is not new at that point. It's the same oral Torah that had been passed down generation to generation, starting at Moses all the way down to that point. And if you want to go this far, before they were sent into exile in Babylon, I'm going to venture to say there was only one version, and everybody knew it. And the only problem took place once the Babylonians came in to play. And that was in the year...
the Babylonians came in and conquered Jerusalem in 586 before the Common Era.
This guy knows stuff. Okay, the way I always remember things by dates is the Torah was given in 2448 on the Jewish calendar, and Alexander the Great, Alexander of Macedonia, he came into the land of Israel in 3448, which is exactly 1,000 years to the day. And Ezra was pushing to get everything sealed before this guy showed up. And so that's right before he showed up, 1,000 years, all of this stuff was sewn up. Like you said, the Tanakh was written down, it was coded, the Mishnah was compiled, all of this stuff had to be sealed and sacred because they already foresaw that once this guy was going to show up, and the Western world was going to show up on the scene, with this guy, they're going to try to steal some of this stuff. And so we had to have it all written down, verified, like we had to protect identity theft, if you will. We had to have everything taken a picture of, so there's no questions later that we already own this stuff before they came.
So how much confidence can we have that the Mishnah that we have today is a reliable transmission of the divine revelation at Mount Sinai?
Absolutely. We have 100%, 110%.
Why? We've got differing...
No, because the fact that they're different. The fact that they differ proves that it's correct. And it sounds crazy, but it does. You take 2 separate people, and you stick them on 2 different areas, and you separate them over 100 years. And they come back singing the same exact thing, except for a few minor points here and there. Because you remember, even though that Hillel and Shammai have a couple of arguments along the way, we're talking about a very small part 99.9% of all of these laws and all of their details that are in the Torah that have been passed down orally, and these two camps have been separated for hundreds of years. They don't have a telephone in between. They don't have a BlackBerry. They don't have internet. There's no Facebook in between. And yet these two camps came out on the same page 99.9% of the time and only had a few disagreements in a few minor marginal areas. That tells you, hey, these guys are on the same page. What's that about? And the answer is that look at Hillel's group. They had no problem. They kept this exact same thing flowing for 1,000 years without any discrepancies. So I think that's a pretty good, you can rest assured when you have that kind of double check that you've got something going on. I am absolutely I'm absolutely convinced that every single word in the Mishnah is exactly how God gave it at Moses at Mount Sinai.
Now, if you were to go to people who took PhDs in secular universities on that question, or on the composition of the Torah, virtually all of them would conclude that the Torah, in the sense of the 5 books of Moses, was composed by many different people and edited together over hundreds of years, and is essentially a post-Mosaic composite work. Why do you believe that the Torah is a unitary document that comes from God?
Because those, I don't care. Those PhDs are idiots and they're ignorant and they're morons. And what basically drives them is they don't want to believe and agree in a higher power because they don't want to change their lifestyle. So they will come up with any kind of stupid kind of a negative criticism. And Bible criticism and all this crap is not something that's new to us Jews. We've been up against it for thousands of years. And you know what? We don't care. It doesn't matter to us. In fact, that's something that you can learn out from this week's Torah portion. There's a lesson here about, like the red heifer we talked about, that there's things that we can't understand and we don't care. And even if all the people laugh at us, even if all the non-Jews laugh at us because we're doing things that just don't make any sense, and we live in a world where everything has to make sense, and you have to have, go to college, and everything has to be sense, and if something doesn't make sense, therefore it should be ridiculed and laughed at. You know what? God says, you know what? I don't care. You Jews are going to do things only because I say so, and if it doesn't make sense and everybody laughs at you, great. Because if you're going to be Jewish and you're going to be frum, you're going to be observant Torah Jew, and you're afraid of what people think of you, this is never going to work for you. And this Judaism is not for you, because Judaism means being part of something that hardly anybody else is a part of. You know, there's 7 billion people on the planet. Only less than 1/4% of them are Jews. Only 14 million. And of the 14 million, how many people keep Shabbos? 2 million? I don't know. How many, right? So you're talking about like a speck of people in the, you're a speck. There's no one doing what you're doing. Now maybe if you lived in Borough Park, or you lived in Monroe, or Williamsburg, or Jerusalem, or one of these places, you're surrounded by frummy Jews. It seems like everybody's doing it, so like you're just fitting in. Okay, that's easy. But you come here to like LA, or go to someplace better. Go to like San Diego or Sacramento, where you're the only Jew, or Modesto. I've been. People look at you. They've never seen a Jew before, right? You walk into town dressed like this. This is like what Abraham Avinu. This is what Abraham went through, right? He's selling. I believe in God, and I know that God exists, and then he's telling me not to kill, and everybody's laughing at you. They don't get it, right? So with this attitude of why am I digressing? I'll get back to this in a second. But the whole purpose of Torah, is to make us different. Kedusha, holiness, doesn't mean like you're above people. It means that you're separated. The word Kadash means to separate you. Jews have to be separated. We have to be separated in the way we look, the way the mitzvahs that we do, and also in the way we think. And I don't care if PhDs can come and they can, they're going to laugh at the way we know. We don't care. You know why? Because we have the Torah. We have the truth. And here's the truth. The truth is, it's not what they want to call, like, written by many different people. And you can't tell me about the telephone game, because this is what we're talking about. Moses told the entire oral Torah to the entire nation of 2.5 million people. 2.5 million people. And what did they do for the next 40 years in the desert? They learned the Torah. They said it out loud to each other. To the point, after 40 years of every single day saying all these laws with all of their details, They were ready to move on into the land of Israel. And from there, they all told their kids this, and this is